Let's get to this piece about what the hell is going to happen with the debt ceiling. Just to remind you, we are rapidly approaching the deadline. It's looking like early June when we would no longer be able to engage in what they call extraordinary measures to keep from defaulting on any of our congressionally approved obligations. So Democrats are trying to figure out what their plan is. Biden had long been saying, we're not going to negotiate. We want a clean debt ceiling increase. That's that. But after McCarthy was able to get the Republican House caucus to coalesce around a package that they were able to narrowly pass through the House, Biden blinked. He did decide to meet with congressional leaders, including McCarthy and McConnell. So here's another piece of what Democrats are trying to float to deal with this whole situation. Put this up on the screen. The headline here is Democrats unveil plan to bypass McCarthy on debt ceiling increase. I think that's a little bit misleading of a headline just because I don't think this plan is actually going to work and they make it sound like it could. But the idea here is a discharge petition through the House that would force a vote on a clean debt ceiling increase. In order to successfully use a discharge petition, you have to get a majority of members to say yes to bringing a vote to the floor. That means they would need a few Republicans to go along with them, and that seems at this point very unlikely. They say House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries in a Dear Colleague letter on Tuesday wrote that Democrats plan to file that discharge petition, which if signed by 218 House members would force a vote on a clean debt ceiling increase. So far, Republicans, even they interviewed some of the more sort of like moderate ones, they're all saying no. It would require signatures of 5 House Republicans to force a vote. Don Bacon, who's one of those moderates, told Axios Leader Jeffries refuses to negotiate. That's not how it works in a divided government. We have to govern, which means we must find some agreement. We must negotiate. Another moderate Republican speaking on the condition of anonymity told Axios, I don't support a discharge petition. Biden has been doing a horrible job of outreach to moderates. They won't get that through, said another House Republican.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is an attempt by Democrats to put some pressure on McCarthy and show that they have some sort of a path to a clean debt ceiling increase. But it looks to me unlikely to work.
It's unlikely, but it's one of those where it's like a pull the ripcord situation, like a reserve shoot, where at the very last moment, if 5 people were willing to sign on, they could just sign on to it. It would discharge it, come to the floor, they could amendment, they could pass it. Then it would be a question then of whether the Senate would be. So I don't think it is in any way something that's going to happen immediately. But I wouldn't even call it a plan B. I'd call it like plan E.
Yeah.
You know, for the very, very last days of when it might work.
Well, it's like if there was some like major economic fallout.
Exactly.
And the moderates started getting freaked out.
Yeah.
Because they do in the Republican caucus now, you know, they have a number of members. We always point to the New York congressional delegation that won in seats where Joe Biden also won. They feel a lot of pressure in terms of the reelect, and they do not want to be saddled with responsibility for some sort of calamitous debt ceiling situation. So you could see if there was some major repercussions, or for those that are, you know, particularly tied in with Wall Street, if there starts to be major market repercussions and their Wall Street donors start freaking out, then you might see potentially 5 Republicans being like, all right, let me get on board with this discharge petition. There is another way, though, potentially. I mean, we've talked before about minting the coin and some of the other workarounds. There's a New York Times report that Biden aides are actually debating whether the debt ceiling is constitutional. So
this is a fun one, actually.
This is interesting. Yeah. So let me tell you, this is based on the 14th Amendment clause, which states that, quote, the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. There are some legal analysts, not like weird kooks, but some serious people who look at this and are like, that means that basically the debt ceiling is not constitutional. And when you have these 2 conflicting instructions coming from Congress, one of them is, hey, spend this money and it's obligated and we've created, you know, these debts and obligations. And the other one is, don't do what you need to do to make sure to pay these things that we told you to pay. That, you know, the 14th Amendment basically comes in and says, you got to honor the obligations that you've made. So they say in terms of how this would go, what the economic fallout would be, let me quote, they say there's a broad consensus on both sides that the move risks roiling financial markets. It's likely to cause a surge in short-term borrowing costs because investors would demand a premium to buy debt that could be invalidated by a court. Moody's Analytics economist Mark Zandi modeled a situation What he believes would happen is there would be short-term economic damage as people freaked out and this worked its way through the court system, but there would be long-term gains if the courts upheld that constitutional interpretation, because you would then remove the threat of future brinksmanship over the limit. Quote, the extraordinary uncertainty created by the constitutional crisis leads to a sell-off in financial markets until the Supreme Court rules, but the economy avoids a recession and quickly rebounds. So do I think it is likely that this direction is going to be pursued, where the White House just decides this debt ceiling is unconstitutional, we are not going to abide by it, and it works its way through the court system? Do I think they even take that approach? No, I think it's unlikely, because Biden's such an institutionalist. Jeff Stein had done previous reporting about discussions behind the scenes, and they had sort of dismissed out of hand all of the potential workarounds. But at least somebody in the administration is considering this option.
So if anybody wants to know the history behind it, it's kind of interesting. The reason why the radical Reconstructionists in Congress added this to the 14th Amendment is because they were afraid that former Confederate states, when they were readmitted, would gain political power and would repudiate previous federal debts to guarantee instead Confederate debt incurred during the war to back their. So basically, they would repudiate like Union debts in order to try and pay off Confederate debt. So what they did is they added this in, saying that the clause would make sure that they would guarantee all of the debts that were incurred by the United States during the Civil War, specifically the Union Army, and it would also, in their view, hopefully discourage loans to future insurrectionists in the event that somebody were to try and guarantee debt, to some official or whatever who had not been, what was a term? I forget, reconciliated or whatever. I think at the time they had to swear an oath to.
That's where the bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion. Where that language comes from.
Anyway, fun history lesson. It's kind of interesting, just to think about how all that played out and how it may now interact with the debt ceiling. And the debt ceiling is interesting. I remember talking about this in 2011 because on the one hand, you have the House of Representatives, which is supposed to appropriate all money, which they have done here technically, but then the debt ceiling itself was not really even in question up until the 2010s with the Tea Party era, then all of these legal interpretations. The big problem too, though, with this plan is, it does have to survive the Supreme Court. You can't just do whatever you want. So even if you agree and you have some legal authors or theories or whatever, it would still get challenged, no question, by the Speaker of the House. He would just sue the president. And given that we have a conservative Supreme Court, I don't really think this one is on the table. Of all of the unilateral options, I think mint the coin has the best choice. But as Jeff laid out in his piece, that one is not a guarantee either. In terms of the legalistic framework, the Federal Reserve and their acceptance of the coin, the way that Congress and all of that would have it. The easiest way is just freaking past a debt ceiling, but that's probably not going to happen.
I mean, I am in favor of them trying any or all of these workarounds, because I think this having every few years this manufactured genuine crisis occur, I think this is an insane way to run a country. And if you want to fight over what the spending should be, et cetera, you fight it when you're appropriating the money, not after you've already said we're going to pay X and Y and Z, and then you're not willing to lift the debt ceiling, this weird technicality that we have as an accident of history that they have to go through with, and you're going to use that to hold the entire country hostage. I think it's terrible. I think it's insane that we have this situation. So I am in favor of, even if there is some risk involved, trying to engage in one of these workarounds. But I think you're right in terms of the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, if the makeup of the court was different, perhaps there might be more appetite for pursuing one of these workarounds. But I also just am fundamentally skeptical that Biden would do anything that's outside of the norms and outside of the box, because he's such an institutionalist. So we will see how this all works out. Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.